How's it going, everyone, and welcome back to post-Appalachian Trail Thru Hike Q&A. This will be the second half of the questions that I got. What was your base weight and typical trail weight? So I think my base weight was around 15 pounds if I had to guess. I never really weighed it too much here and there, and total weight on trail, I can guesstimate, fully loaded with like 4 days of food and water, would be around 25 pounds. I don't think I was ever much heavier than that, though. Can you recommend any specific sections to hike for someone who can't break free for a thru hike but still would like to hit the trail for a week at a time? There are some really good sections, like the Roan Highlands was one of my favorite, and Southern Pennsylvania is another one of my favorite, and number 3 I would say would be the 100-mile wilderness up in Maine, if you can get a way to tackle that far north. How noisy is it in and around the shelters? It really wasn't too bad. Most everybody's on the same wavelength where you're hiking all day and you're tired, and then as soon as you get to a shelter, not a lot of people stay up to have a campfire, so everybody just kind of sets up. Once the sun goes down, everybody goes to bed. There's not a lot of not a lot of rowdy riff-raff type of hikers that you'll see out there. So once the sun's down, everybody just goes to bed. It's not that bad. And is it better to tent camp? It all depends on what you like. Some people just didn't like jammed in the shelters next to a lot of people. People snore and stuff, so you might be kind of bothered by that. If there's room to tent, it's always kind of easier to set up your tent or hammock a little bit away from the shelters. A lot of people like their privacy that way. I found it more of a time-consuming chore to set up the tent versus staying in the shelters. I liked being in the shelter. Just pack up your stuff and hit the trail first thing in the morning, so that's just my preference. How's the cell service on the trail? Like I mentioned in the last video, I think Verizon has the best service record coverage area. Overall, it was 99% reliable in a lot of areas, especially further south. Once you get way further north, it's going to be less reliable for the cell coverage, depending on what you have. But overall, Verizon was definitely the best carrier provider out there. Do you recommend a Garmin, or is a cell phone fine for safety? I would say a cell phone is fine. And worst case scenario, if anything seriously happens to you, like you break your leg and you're stuck where you're at on trail in need of some type of medical assistance, just stay where you're at, keep calm, and within 30 minutes to a few hours at the most, somebody will come by, whether it's a day hiker, another no-bo, or a sobo. Somebody will come by, you can get their attention, and they'll be able to get out and get help to come to you. A lot of people use the in-reach spot device that they would carry with them, like on their clipped onto their backpack on their shoulder or something. Those are pretty good, but more of an isolated, out in the woods type of device. The Appalachian Trail never really isn't that isolated out in the woods, just being where it is on the East Coast and the trail being so crowded as it is already. You're never really that far from civilization, so I don't think you need to go so far as to get some type of in-reach device for the Appalachian Trail, but maybe if you're doing like the Pacific Crest Trail or the Continental Divide Trail, definitely look into something on those trails. How many hikers would you see a day typically on trail? It's definitely more crowded in the south as everybody's starting, but I would say in a typical day, anywhere from 5 to 20 hikers maybe. You'll always be passing somebody going southbound. I usually seem to hike a little bit faster than most people. I found myself passing a lot of people during the day maybe. And you definitely all bunch up in and around the shelters, so I may end my day early and get into a shelter where I'm by myself for the first hour there, but then people will start trickling in, and I may see up to 10 to 20 people maybe at most around the shelters sometimes. Is a 20-degree quilt enough? Yes, a 20-degree quilt would be plenty. That's what I carried. I was plenty warm. I was never cold. I'm the type of person who hates the cold anyway, and I get cold easily, it seems like, and for me, a 20-degree quilt was plenty. Now, in conjunction with that, I had the thin liner bag, and I was also sleeping in thermal underwear. And at the coldest times, I would even have my puffy jacket on. So being totally bundled up with a 20-degree quilt was fine. Again, I also started in April, so it was more on the warmer times season-wise. But if you're starting in January and February time frame, it's definitely going to be way colder, and you're going to have well below freezing conditions out there up in the mountains. Was there anyone who started and finished around the same time as you? Yeah, a couple people. I kind of lost track of some of the people I initially started with, like the first week or so that I was on trail around. I think most of those people, it seemed like, were behind me, and I'm not really sure if they had finished the trail or not. But what was interesting is once I got further up north, I would run into people I'd never seen before, and we would talk to each other about what our start date is, and then I would find out they started only within a day or two of when I did, and I just never had run into them in the last 2,000 miles. So there's people you'll kind of bounce in and around with, but overall I don't think I was moving too fast or too slow. I was generally kind of around some of the other people that started in the same time frame as me, and even caught up with a lot of southbounders that had started in the March time frame. I did see a lot of those kind of people on trail, but everybody just kind of hikes their own pace. At times you commented on the slipperiness of your shoe soles. Did you ever feel you should have gone with boots? I don't think so. Boots in general are going to be that much more heavier. I think the trail runners themselves usually have pretty good grip on wet rocks. Just the brand that I had was terrible as far as slipping on wet rocks. And I don't know, I guess I would have had to try more brands to see. There's got to be something out there that's really good on the types of surfaces that I was walking on. It's just that the oboes themselves seem to not be that great. Whether they were brand new, fresh out of the box, or even with 1,200 trail miles on them, they seem to be just as poor on wet surfaces as what I was experiencing. So I don't know. I'm gonna have to do more testing with different brands, but for now I think I'm just gonna stick with the oboes. The only reason I wouldn't go with heavier boots is just because they're heavy. So maybe I'm just kind of stubborn. I think I'm going to stick with what I'm using right now. Any advice, recommendations for a 2022 thru hiker? So if you know you're leaving like in the next 4 to 6 months, hopefully you've got most of your gear figured out. If not, start getting it settled now. I'm already looking at new gear options for future hikes that I've got coming up with, and I have found that due to global supply shortages, they're also hitting a lot of equipment retailers and stuff as well. So a lot of tents that I was looking at, they're all sold out. A lot of backpacks I was looking at, they're all sold out. So figure out what you need now time frame and start getting it ordered. Because if it's stuff already may take 4 to 6 weeks to get to you, that type of delivery time may be doubled. So I don't know. I would say finish compiling all the gear that you need as quick as possible just due to shortages. And definitely get out and test your gear. Unpack and pack your backpacks over and over again to make sure you memorize where everything needs to be located, and get out in the field and test it all. See if the air mattress that you got actually works for you. Test the shoes as much as you can. Get out hiking, and if you live near the trail, hopefully you can actually get on the trail itself and hike some easier sections, some tougher sections, and get the practice in that way. Do you have to be in great shape at the beginning to make it to the end? Not really, not in great shape. I spent about a month before actually hitting the trail doing a lot of workouts. I've got stairs in my house, so I did a lot of stairs, about an hour a day. I just go up and down stairs, up and down, up and down. Definitely focusing on leg exercises. I think you can look through YouTube and find other hiking fitness related stuff where people talk about the best types of exercises and stretches to kind of get yourself ready for this type of a hike. There are people that go straight from sitting on the couch to hiking the trail. I would not recommend that. You got to get some type of workouts in, but you don't have to be in super good physical shape. Again, if you can actually get on the trail itself and experience some of the hiking, definitely get past that first week or so to where you're, beat your legs up a little bit, let them recover, and then go out and hit the trail. What kind and make of backpack, tent, and stove did you use? Pros and cons of each. First, I would say go check out my post-AT gear review video, and even the one I made before I even set out on the trail. A lot of the same gear I took was what I kept with throughout the entire hike. So overall, I didn't have any main issues with anything, just little things here and there. Drove me to be looking for a new backpack and a new tent. I'll show those once I get them in and test them out on some hikes coming up this fall, hopefully, but overall, they were, what I used was good. It worked well enough. There were just, little critiques I had here and there. I think the tent I had the most critiques on with the Z-Pack's little one-man tent. It just never set up right, and it already is notorious for being more of a difficult to set up, not being a freestanding tent, but I think a freestanding tent is what I'm going to be looking into for my next main go-to tent. Like I said earlier, with supply chain issues, what I want is currently not available, so I'm looking at backup options, and I'll kind of show new equipment, what I got when I get out in the field and test it on some future hikes here coming up. But as far as a stove setup, I was really happy with the whole cook setup that I had. The MSR Pocket Rocket 2 and the Tokes titanium pot that I took out, all that kind of stuff worked out perfectly. But just little things with the tent and backpack, definitely upgrading. What kind of stinks about the good backpacks that I'm looking for is that the good ones are all from little cottage industry stuff like Hyperlight or ULA, and I can't get anywhere to find those in a store to actually try those on and kind of get some hands-on experience before I actually buy them. I just have to go with what the online picture looks like. So I'm struggling with that a little bit to try to find the right kind of stuff I'm looking for. But again, I'll let you know what I kind of look at and end up with. Could you give us a rough estimate of how much you had to spend on the thru hike? You can include gear cost, hotels, or a few items, but mainly I'm curious about park fees, permits, and supply runs. Like I mentioned in the first Q&A, I think I spent more on average than the average thru hiker. I've always heard that about $1,000 a month is a good budget you should go for, and I think that's pretty accurate. I probably spent between $1,200 and $1,500 a month, though I never kept a running total or really calculated. I just had a chunk of money saved up and then just kind of started going through that, and the trail kind of cost whatever it cost. I did have some really expensive hotel stays though, like when I was in Hanover, New Hampshire. That's just a really expensive college town. I did a 0 there, so 2 nights in an expensive hotel, and it was over $300 for each night. So that was one of my biggest expenses I ever had on the whole trail. And I definitely had some really expensive resupply runs. Everything up north is going to be more expensive in general, so I think a lot of hikers get used to the prices in the south, to where a hostel stay might be like 20 bucks for a bunk, but then when they get up north, it's going to be like 60 bucks for a month, for 60 bucks for a bunk, and they are just kind of shocked with the dramatic change in the prices. As far as park fees, permits, and that kind of stuff, the only real park fee was going through the Smokies. You have to take care of that online and then print out your permit and have a physical paper copy on you the whole time. I think it was good for a month prior to when you sign up for that, so I just went ahead and did that before I hit the trail, and as long as you start the Smokies within that month prior time frame, you'll be fine, which should be enough time to get there. I think it's only 200 miles or something like that from Springer till you start the Smokies. And I think that was about 20 bucks for that permit. And the Shenandoahs is the other national park you enter, but that one was completely free. You just had to fill out the little entry registration thing at the initial entry kiosk. Whether you're going northbound or southbound, you'll be able to run into that and keep that with you the whole time. And because we had a car trying to get into Baxter State Park, my dad had to pay a car entrance fee of, I think it was $15 at the gate. And that was really the only park fees we had to pay the whole time. What did you do to keep gnats and mosquitoes away as you slept in the shelter? Luckily, everything except mosquitoes all goes away at night. There were definitely a lot of little biting type insects, but once you're kind of tucked in and the sun goes down, they just all kind of leave you alone, which is really nice. So I never had bother from anything except the mosquitoes. The mosquitoes would stay out all night and try to bite you. I only spent maybe 2 nights total in mosquito-infested areas where I was in the shelter and was bothered by mosquitoes. And I would just roll my sleeping liner bag up over my head and try to hide that way. And after that, I just stayed in my tent as much as I could in the mosquito areas, and that worked out good for the most part. And the next part of this question just goes about complaining about my tent. Am I indeed going to switch tents? Yes. I'll hang on to the Z-Packs one for a bit. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I'm tired of it at this point. It's a little too frustrating to set up. Again, I don't know if it's Z-Packs in general with all their tents. It's just the one that I got in the production process. It just didn't seem right in comparison to the other Z-Packs ones I saw out there. I never saw anybody with the exact model of tent that I had, but it definitely didn't set up like it was supposed to. So I'm looking at some other companies, and I'll let you know and kind of showcase what I got the next time I can get it out in the woods. How did I train to prepare for the thru hike? I think I touched on that a little bit in a previous question, but really a month prior to me starting the trail, I was just doing exercise type stuff in the house. Just Google search on YouTube, stretches for hiking, a lot of leg work type stuff. And what I did, I think, helped with preventing knee injuries, I guess, because I never had really any problems with leg muscles or knees while I was out there in comparison to most other people. But Everybody's body is different. I don't know if I'm just lucky or it naturally just turned out that way, but I did do a bunch of stretches and stuff that were supposedly to help my knees, and up and down stairs, getting leg exercises done that way. How long did the trip take? And did I use an app for supply sites? Yeah, the trip total took 156 days, and that included the 17 zeros that I took. I started on April 20th and finished on September 22nd. As far as apps that I used, there are two main good ones that a lot of people use, Guthooks and AWOL's Guide. The AWOL's Guide you can get in a paper copy, or you can get an app on your phone. I got both of those in an electronic app version. So the AWOL's Guide is the best one for figuring out logistical related stuff, and a lot of good town information and where you can get resupply runs and hostel information and all that good stuff. The other app is Guthooks, and that one's better for GPS routing and keeping you on the trail from getting lost. So I think both of those apps work perfectly in conjunction with each other, so those two I would recommend the most. Is Maine the toughest state on the AT? I don't think so. It's definitely rough. Southern Maine is way rougher than northern Maine, so the ease of the 100-mile wilderness in comparison to everything else makes Maine overall not that bad. But southern Maine is definitely going to beat you up. That's where the Mahoosic Notch and stuff is at, and there's a lot of rough areas down there in general. But I would say the roughest state that beat me up the most is going to be New Hampshire. On the south and north ends of before you're doing the presidential reigns in the White Mountains area, you're going to get beat up by North and South Kinsmen. That one's really bad. And then you'll finish up with the Wildcats. That's another really, really rough area. So New Hampshire's going to take it for being the roughest state. Now that the epic adventure is over, can you think of any major things or equipment you would have done differently? I don't think so. I was happy enough with the equipment that I never really switched anything out, even though I was getting frustrated with the tent, and little details that I didn't like were bothering me about my backpack. I kept with them the whole time. I think the only other thing I would change, like I mentioned in the last video, was my start date. I wish I would have started just a little bit earlier, but that was unavoidable just based on my retirement date. How did you deal with all the sweaty stickiness at the end of the day and finally be able to get to sleep? So I kept a pair of thin wool long johns as my main sleep clothes. I didn't want to sleep in my hiking clothes for that reason, because they were going to be dirty and sweaty. Maybe if you were walking through a lot of mud or a rainy day, you're going to want to take all your wet clothes off. The hottest times where it was hiking through like up to 100 degrees, and at night it may only cool down to a low of like 75. That was kind of the worst sweaty, sticky conditions. And in that, I would just be down to my boxer shorts and just sleeping in my thin liner bag and just going with that. Having the 20-degree quilt in those type of temperatures is just way too much. So in that regard, the quilt was an overkill. I never swapped it out to a lighter one. A lot of people did, though, I think. They had like 40-degree quilts and stuff that they were carrying through the summer months, and that seemed to work out just fine. Can you tell me which external hard drive you used? Were you able to save LumaFusion videos from your phone straight to the drive? Yeah, the electronics setup that I used, which I tried to explain hopefully as well as I could in some of the electronics videos and post gear and stuff that I've been talking about, but this was the hard drive I took. It's from SanDisk. It's a 1 terabyte solid state drive, and it's designed to be shock proof, and it's kind of got this rubbery coating on it, so it's meant to be mostly waterproof, and you can drop it and stuff, and it's pretty shock resistant. And the whole setup that I used to transfer files back and forth all worked out pretty good. One thing is that the 1 terabyte drive, I actually burned through that and was only able to save probably 65 episodes or so of my 78 episode adventure just onto the external hard drive when I did the max high def versions of the master copies that I wanted to keep. But I was far along enough in the adventure, and my phone itself had enough memory storage to where I didn't need to buy a second hard drive or anything to store the videos. Once I got back, I was able to copy everything to my computer and then cut the remaining high definition videos that I was able to finish up. I'd like to know if you'd considered camping with a hammock rather than a tent. Maybe there's pros and cons for each, but let's hear my opinion on the matter. Just with my minor back issues, I don't think I could ever use a hammock. I toss and turn a whole lot, and I feel like I need the more firm, hard ground, and the inflatable mattress that I used seemed to be a perfect setup for getting the best quality sleep that I could have while I'm kind of out on the trail. But overall, in general, if you're more of a hammock camper and you're worried about how that would work on the AT, I would think the AT is perfect for hammock camping, if not way easier, because you can literally just stop and stealth camp almost anywhere on the entire trail whenever you get tired and need to take a break. There's plenty of trees in and around all the shelter areas. You don't have to worry about finding a tent pad or something anywhere. Some of the difficult areas to hammock might be through the White Mountains when you're going through the presidential range, because everything's above tree line for a long section. There were a lot of people that were just trying to naturally avoid the AMC huts anyway, because it was difficult to get in there. They're not doing the work for stays due to the coronavirus stuff going on. And they're really, really expensive to stay at anyway. So a lot of people would kind of hike down side trails, get below tree line where they could. Even with a hammock, you might have to go down trail a lot further to find the more sturdier trees to hang a hammock in anyway, but I think it's doable. I think a lot of people were able to pull it off, getting a hammock set up, done through the entire AT without issue, so I think you'll be fine if you're a hammock-only camper. Did you have any clue what you were getting yourself into before you began your trek? Yeah, luckily I got interested in this about 5 years before I started the trail, so I started collecting my gear. I started watching a lot of other people do their thru hikes on YouTube, so I had a pretty good idea what I was getting myself into. I knew that the AT was probably the most difficult long trail in the United States, so with that knowledge, I was a lot ahead of the curve, I think, in regards to a lot of people that were out there. I saw a lot of people starting the trail, and they just had no hiking experience. They had no idea what they were getting themselves into, and that's probably the main reason why most people quit within just the first 30 miles. They get to Neal's Gap, the trail's way more difficult than they ever expected, and they give up at that point, which is unfortunate. Did you know you were going to climb boulders for days at a time? Yeah, I knew there were sections that were going to be like that. I would say overall it kind of met my expectations as far as large boulder climbing. Again, some were way worse, but overall it was about met my expectations. I think the biggest thing I did not expect was like going through Virginia and stepping on small rocks and stuff for days at a time and just getting my feet beat up. That was more unexpected. If you had to do it over, knowing what you did now, would you do it again? Yep, I would do it again. However, so I would do it again as a first-time experience, but now that I've done it once already, would I do it a second or third time? No, I don't think so. I think it's a one-time only trail, and the reason I think that is because it's just too difficult. I don't see myself ever climbing Katahdin again. That is a really difficult mountain. I don't want to go through the Wildcats again. I don't want to climb Kinsman again. There's other sections that I see myself doing in a lot of cool, beautiful, favorited areas, but as a whole, another thru hike through the AT, I don't think so. That's just too rough. I don't want to put myself through that experience. I'm glad I did it, but not again, probably. Did you plan out what shelters you wanted to stay at in advance of the hike? Only in that, as I was looking ahead, planning the next resupply, whether it was like a 4-day stretch or a 5-day stretch, I would see how many miles between like a town to a town, and then I would calculate how many days I think I could knock it out, and I would look at the shelters in that time frame and seeing if maybe I could bounce out, depending on what the terrain looked like, 15 miles a day, 20 miles a day, and I would specifically target the shelters because I liked staying at them. But that's the only time I would really look at what shelters I would see in the future to aim for, and for the most part I think I pulled it off exactly how I was hitting and planning for each of the sections, so I think that was a pretty good way to do it. Where do I recommend taking zeros? I don't know. There were a lot of cool towns here and there. Like the little town of Boiling Springs was very picture perfect as I was passing through there, so that would have been maybe a cool town to take a zero in. I would say just taking zeros, just let them happen naturally. Your body will tell you if you need a break or not. There were a lot of people out there, I think. Well, maybe not too many, but there were people out there that would be 4 months on trail and I ran into them, and they would say that they've never taken any zeros. And I think that's kind of ridiculous. You need to have some rest going on, or at least take like a 2-mile Nero into a town. But one of the places I wish I could have taken more on-trail zeros is as you get further north, you get through the really rough stuff in the first half of Maine, and then when you're on the second half of Maine, going through the 100-mile wilderness, it's a lot easier, and it's just such a beautiful area, and I wish I could have stopped and stayed at some of the really cool stealth sites and the spots along some of the ponds and lakes up there. It was just awesome. I wish I could have taken 10 days to do the 100-mile wilderness. It was just one of my favorite areas, but I got into a time crunch and bad weather was coming in and logistically getting into Baxter State Park and all that kind of stuff. So it happened how it happened, but I could see myself wanting to go back up there and just take it longer and take some zeros on trail. Plans for next year. Yep, I'm going to keep hiking. I'm retired and I got nothing else to do, so next year I'm already looking at doing the PCT. I'll start putting out some more videos in the next month or two. The first registration deadline for doing the PCT is in November 9th, I think. And it's kind of a weird first come, first serve, convoluted luck of the draw process. So once I get through that, I'll kind of cover that process and how I fared with what my start date might be. But yeah, looking at the PCT and starting getting gear collected and stuff like that, so more videos will be coming out. I'm going to try to get some more local-ish hiking done through the Midwest. Where I'm at currently is not good for hiking anywhere, so I got to get out to like Arkansas or down into Texas and stuff. But hopefully I can get some fall/winter hiking done coming out, so hopefully we'll keep the videos coming for the next couple of months till I can get back on another big long trail. This next person's wondering about financing of the trip and shipping logistics for resupplies. I've already covered the main focus points for my overall finances, but as far as the logistics of shipping yourself stuff, I only did that once, I think. It was right even before I even started the trail. I figured my first resupply point was going to be into Neal's Gap at Mountain Crossings, and I went ahead and shipped myself a package there. Took 4 days to hike into that point and picked up my package from Mountain Crossings, and that all worked out just fine. I kind of covered some of those details in whichever episode that was, 2 or episode 3, of how I did that. You can just say care of whatever the name of the hostel or lodge or wherever you're sending it to. Have your name on there, the address of all the that location, and they'll hold it for you. And when you get in there, should be able to pick it up and not have any problems. I think once when I had my support family group back home sent me my cold weather gear, I had it sent to the local post office in Hanover, New Hampshire. And that was kind of similar, where it's just care of, general delivery, and then the post office address. And it worked out just fine. The hiker towns are used to hikers going back and forth and shipping stuff that way, just because it's a little non-standard compared to how people normally ship packages. But people who work at the post offices and stuff in your trail towns, they know the game and they know how it works, and the process is really easy. I never tried doing the bounce box thing, but I guess if you go into a post office where you've shipped yourself stuff but you figure out you don't need it, or you open your box and you only need half of the food that's in there, you can reseal the box, I guess. No, maybe if you don't even get into it. I guess if you have the box unopened completely, and you can ship it to yourself, you know, a couple of days in the future. I think that's how it works. But I never did the whole bounce box thing. One thing that has definitely been on my mind is the possibility of hammocking on trail. Can it be done even if it required a majority of stealthing? Yep, like I mentioned before about hammocking, I think it'd be really easy. Easier than doing the tent stuff. Because if you have a tent, you're really stuck to getting lucky on finding a good stealth site if nobody else is taking it first, or you're stuck at sitting at the shelters. If you got the hammock, you can literally just camp anywhere and just hike till you're tired, and then stealth right off the trail wherever you find a good spot to hang it on a tree, but should not be hard to find. And that finishes up the group of questions that I've got for now. So if you've got other stuff, just keep leaving comments in these videos. I'll either answer them directly on YouTube or maybe put another part 3 video together. I'll see what I'm doing. But thanks for all the love and support and everything that I had through the whole thru hike. It was just as cool for me, I think, sharing it with all of you guys as it was for me to actually do the hike and film everything. So I'm happy with the end result of the product that I was able to present, I think. And hopefully you guys all got some good information and experience as you were following along. But more hikes and videos and whatever else is coming out in the future, so I'm not going anywhere. I'm still fully retired and I've got oodles of time left, so I'm starting to already plan out, what's the next 3 years going to look like, what's the next 5 years of hiking look like, so I'm not quitting anytime soon. So thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you guys on another hike here in the near future. I'll see you next time.